Hi, and welcome to this session. I'm excited to have you here. This is a virtual recording of a live session that was focused on engaging students during remote learning, but really all of the tools and strategies and techniques we'll talk about here could transfer to any environment, whether it's virtual, blended, or a face-to-face or socially distant teaching environment. So before we get too far into things, I will introduce myself. My name is Brenny Coomer, and I am the coordinator of instructional technology here in BCSC. And I usually talk to a lot of you via email, so it's nice to kind of see some faces and names. And goals for our session. As always, we will be tying everything to the Universal Design for Learning framework, but for this particular session, we're going to focus on that green column in the UDL guidelines, engagement. So identify some best practices for engagement, whether you're in an in-person environment or a virtual one. We'll practice using a couple of different educational technology tools. It's best if you kind of stop this video at any point if you want to get your feet wet with something and experiment. And at the very end, you can kind of set a timer for yourself. I won't keep a timer going here live on this whole session, but it's a time for you to practice and play and get your feet wet, and then plan to use those tools to support student engagement no matter your virtual or in-person learning environment. So to get us started, I have a little bit of a thought-provoking image here, and this is actually something that you can use as an engagement or as a lesson starter in your class. So remote teaching, how did you feel? If you had to pick one of these, which one would you pick and why? Some of us maybe felt a whole roller coaster of all of these moments. Maybe we started out at number one. Things were probably scary and intimidating at first. Virtual and remote teaching and e-learning was something we'd done maybe once or twice, but definitely not for a whole 9 weeks. And then maybe we progressed into stage 2, where some things got a little tough sometimes. We might have gotten a little bit stuck in the mud, but we pushed through it. And then number 3 being, I'm comfortable, I'm pretty excited about this, I nailed it, which maybe you felt that way as we were several weeks into e-learning and your students and yourself are getting into the group of things, right? But the idea behind this is to demonstrate that we have quite a bit of variability amongst ourselves and how we felt about remote learning. We have variability across the experience itself, and it's different for us teaching that way, and it's definitely different for our students learning that way. So we can't always try to use the same tried and true tools as an in-person environment as we can on virtual, and we can't only provide only one option. So it's important that we provide flexible choices for our students because they are different in how they are engaged, how they're excited to learn. Their brains are as unique as their fingertips. So we have to approach things with a multi-angle approach and give them different choices. And ways that we can do that is focusing on the UDL guidelines, using that as our kind of planning place to build in some of these different options for engagement. So we're going to focus on 5 main things today in this session: organizing your course for engagement, helping your students engage with the content. So that first area of the engagement guidelines in UDL is focusing on recruiting interest. We'll spend some time on that. We'll focus on engaging with the teacher and how you can make connections with your students and give them feedback that encourages them to keep sustaining and persisting. Engaging with peers, the importance of collaboration in learning and ways that you can do that even if you're not all in the same classroom. And then engaging with yourself. So thinking about your experience, self-reflecting, and using that to plan ahead, and showing your students how to do that too. So those are our main 5 areas of focus. So before I get too far into things, I will say that there are lots of links and resources on here. I will not probably click into every single one of them, but most of them. Just it's helpful for you if you make a copy of my slide deck so that you have it saved in your Google Drive so that you always have all of my templates and other resources quick at your fingertips for you to access. So the first thing for learner engagement, something that's really important for us to do, is to focus on organizing our course, right? We can't really get our students fired up and ready to learn if they don't know where to go, they don't know where to click, they can't find the links, they'll shut down and they'll get pretty frustrated. So the key thing is organizing your course in a consistent way. And it's really helpful if you use the new course template as your guide there for kind of setting some consistency, whether you use the folders and pages option or you use the plans option. That's the way that you can create some consistency in your course organization. And it's important that you put your lesson goal somewhere where your students clearly see it so they know what they're going to be doing that day, and instructions that tells them how they're going to get there. It's helpful if you put a video that goes with that, especially if you're a primary grade teacher, your students are still learning how to read, so it's helpful to have a video there so they have you explaining, and it's also good for them to see a familiar face if they're teaching online. Make sure your students have access to past lessons as well, in case they need to go back and use that for reference or if they were absent or out of class. And then make sure that your students understand how they can reach out to you. So those are 4 key things to focus on before you can even dive into actual engaging lessons and building in opportunities for students to collaborate and to connect with you as the teachers. You have to have these bare essentials here with getting your course organized so that your students can dive into those other resources. So I like to use this analogy. It doesn't really matter how wonderful and great your lesson content is if the students can't get there. It's kind of like trying to eat a bowl of cereal with a fork. Yes, you can get there, but it might be a little frustrating along the way. So it's helpful if maybe you give your students an organized, streamlined, simple to navigate. It's like they're eating cereal with a spoon. It's efficient. They know where they need to go, and the job is successful. All right. So moving past that kind of disclaimer there at the beginning, now we're going to focus on ways you can engage your students. And the first one is getting your students excited about the content that you're teaching and making it come to life for them. So we know that according to Brain Sciences and Universal Design for Learning, that recruiting interest is a really key part in getting students excited to learn. And a way that we can do that is by giving them choices. So letting them kind of have some say in the learning environment and what they get to do. So ways that you can do that is you can provide lots of choices within digital tools. So if you are looking to give students options, you can give them choice in learning resources. So instead of having everyone just only read a written text or an online article, maybe they can watch a video that covers the same content, or look at a slideshow that has the same thing, or maybe look at an interactive presentation or something along those lines that has the same information, but the students get a choice at what they get to use. You can also give students choice in how they show their understanding. So instead of having every kid make a video, maybe they can write, they can draw, they can type, they can make a slideshow and summarize key points there. So giving students choice there. You don't have to give a whole smorgasbord of options, just give a couple of optimized ones, get student feedback and see what they preferred, and use that to kind of guide your planning moving forward. Ways to structure this so it doesn't get really overwhelming by providing choices really quickly is you can use the page tool on It's Learning to give students choices. You can put the options there on the page, and I'll show you that here in a second. The other way you can do that is by using a hyperdoc. And what a hyperdoc is, it's a lesson organization format where all of your links and lesson resources are on one Google Doc. So you could put this Google Doc on It's Learning, or if you're using a Google Slide instead, put that on It's Learning, and then once students have that one document, they're good to go for the day. That's their reference to go back to. It's where they can see all the instructions, and you can add lots of content. So the example that I have linked here is a sample hyperdoc, and what we see is there's an engagement activity there, and then students have choices here on what they can use to learn. So reading, slides, or video, ways to show their understanding, and then bonus activities at the end. So a hyperdoc is a really great way to organize your lessons and give students choices. And this was copied from a template that I found on this website called hyperdoc.co. And there are tons and tons of samples on there, and every single one of them builds in opportunities to give students choices. So it's kind of a great way of building that into your practice. You have that template to guide you. The other option I'm going to show you is how you can use It's Learning to give students choices as well, using the page tool and the assignment tool. Right, so the example here on It's Learning is that as a part of a step in this lesson, students got to pick what learning resources they would like to use. And this is a page on It's Learning, so you just add content blocks. And when you add content blocks and select rich content, you have tons of options here in what you can add. So video, audio, links, pictures, whatever have you. And here's an example of one. So students pick 2. There's a reading, there's a video, and there's slides, and then there's a set of cards which the students who were in person could possibly use those and get those from the teacher and have their own set. So that's an example of that. And then for showing their understanding, students could also have choices via the assignment tool. So students could write out responses, they could type, They could put a picture, and here are some choices. All right. So this example, they could type a response, add an audio recording, or do a video, and students have the ability to do that because they have that same rich text editor there. So that's a great way to get students excited about learning, is to give them choices in how they learn and then how they showcase that understanding for you as well. Another great way to get students excited about your content and your lessons is to make your content authentic and relevant, so to bring it to life. So science shows that making lessons relevant really matters. It gets students excited. It helps them make the connections between their own personal lived experiences and what you're studying. And we know that when students can make those connections, they not only have a better appreciation for the content, but they also are more likely to retain that information too and be able to pull that for later recall. So the article that's linked here gives you more information about the brain sciences and the importance of making your content relevant and the effect of that on learning. So it's linked there if you want to have that and reference it. But there are some additional ways that you can make your content relevant, even if you're not teaching in person, or if you are, you have to keep students at a social distance and maybe aren't doing some of the same activities that you might have done before. You can make your content come to life by taking students to those places. So making it an immersive experience instead of just talking about a place, showing students what it looks like, letting them semi-experience it for themselves. So making connections helps our students see that the content does matter. It is connected to their lives and better gives them the why behind the learning. So there are a couple of examples here. And one way that you can make your content authentic and relevant for your students so they are more engaged is to take them to those places around the world. And there are some expensive virtual reality headsets and tools and things out there, but there's also some really great free ones that give you the same ability to create and take your students to places without having to spend any money. And one of those examples is using a Google Tour Creator, which is a virtual reality tool within Google. You can add your own panoramic pictures or use the millions of pictures out there that Google has from Google Street View images. So here are a couple of examples. Here we have a tour of the different branches of government. So it walks you through those areas. With these little points of interest are pictures and more information about those different branches of government. And students have an audio narration that can go with that. And then over here is a kind of a guided way of looking through this. So students aren't just passively clicking through those scenes. They're making the connections between some vocabulary, doing some writing, and really making it a more interactive experience for them. So another example of that, I have one, but I think I skipped that slide. So a way to build this virtual tour is through Google Tour Creator, like I had mentioned. And here's an example of how to do this. There's a video walkthrough that shows you how to build on Tour Creator. I am not going to show you that right now because it's a little bit of a lengthy video, but I will show you a couple of resources here that you can use and reference at your own speed. So here is a written guide that shows you step-by-step how to make a tour in Tour Creator. Has the pictures, written instructions, and so on and so forth, and tells you how you can even add your own audio recordings. And here is a Google Doc template that you can use to help you structure making your own Google tour. So this one is from a social studies colleague, and what you can do to make this your own, if it's your own content area, is if you click File, you have to sign in first, but click File, make a copy, then you can plug in your own information, and the students can have this to help them kind of be scaffolded as they go through that tour. And what she even did is she added in video clips to supplement some of the content that was actually in those virtual reality scenes. You can make it as simple as complex as you like. That's just a starting point. Here are a whole series of pre-made tours. So if you're not necessarily feeling comfortable by making your own tour yourself, maybe this is a great way to get your feet wet, is to use one that someone else has already made. So there are lots of tours here, anything from national parks to outer space to mountain ranges and more. So to use one of these, all you have to do is just click the resource. And this is what your screen will look like if you're experiencing this virtual tour. So some are definitely a little bit more exciting than others, But what's cool is that it pans around for you, but you have the ability to kind of toggle and look around and view different things. So we're in the Mission Control Center for NASA. And if you notice there's a little picture icon here, if I click that picture, there's additional information. So I can learn even more about this place. It looks like there's more pictures below that as well. So it kind of guides me through the scene, and I can see those different pictures. And if I want to go to another scene, I'll click the arrow and I'm moving on to the next place. And for the information card, I just click this little eye. It tells me more information and shows me where those pictures are, which are called points of interest. So I don't have to guess where they are myself if I don't want to. So those are some pre-made tours that you can use. You don't have to worry about making them yourself. And students can view this on any device, whether it's a cell phone, a Chromebook, a laptop, iPad, tablet. They can do it on anything. And if you wanted to share this with your students, there's a share button here. You can just copy this link, or you can even embed it onto It's Learning if you wanted. If you wanted to make your own tour, I would recommend using that guide. And to start building your tour, you're going to go to Tour Creator, which is technically a part of Google's program called Poly, P-O-L-Y, which is a bunch of virtual reality and augmented reality softwares and tools, and Tour Creator is a part of that family. So I would go there, I'll click Get Started. And I have the option here to either build a tour totally from scratch or to use a template. So here are some examples of ones I've already made. If I want to start from scratch, I'll click New Tour. If I want to start from a template, I can browse through these ones, and there's lots for any subject area. If I'm starting from scratch, I'll click New Tour. I have to give it a cover photo. So I'm just going to pick something random. I have a bunch of random pictures on my computer. I'll just pick this Columbus one again. The title, I don't have to give it a description, but I will. Give it a category, create, and now I can start building. So I can either upload my own panoramic pictures if I have them. So maybe I've used my phone or another device to take those pictures. I can upload them. If I haven't, then I can pull from Google's millions of pictures database. So I can type in a location here and it pulls from Google Street View. I'll type in the location and it takes me to usually one at random. It's not always the highest quality one that it takes you to, just to warn you. If I don't like this picture and I want to go somewhere nearby, this yellow peg man here, if I pick him up, I can drop him in other places. And as you notice, as I'm picking him up and moving him around, I'm seeing all of these other places where I can start my tour instead. And if I like this picture, I can pan around and like it. If this is what I wanted to do, I could click Add Scene, give it a title. I can add scene narration and music if I have some saved on my computer. Description. I can add a point of interest, which is kind of like what we saw on that NASA one. It draws their eye to something. I can move that around. And after I've added a point of interest, I can give it a title. I can add pictures from somewhere else, maybe saved on my device that aren't necessarily a part of this scene. And again, narration and description. And I would keep doing that if I have more points of interest I want to add. And whenever I'm finished, I can click Add Scene. Or I can be finished with making my tour and click Publish, which gives me a link that I can share and put on It's Learning. Speaking of virtual field trips, it's fun and great to make your own, but if you're a little pressed for time and you don't have to worry about building on Tour Creator, what you could also do is use some of the different free virtual tours and virtual field trips that are out there, and you can even connect with tour guides. So an example of this is that the California Department of Parks and Recreation has tons of virtual field trips out there right now as a part of a program due to teaching and learning in the pandemic. So if you are interested in that, there is a link that's here. and it shows you that there are lots of different tours, and you can even connect with park rangers. So if I really want to go on one of these tours and see, I want to go check out the redwoods because that's on my list. I can participate in this video, which is the tour itself, or if I click email me, it will connect me with a park ranger and I can get even more information from them. So that's kind of an exciting option there. The other idea here is if you wanted to schedule something on your calendar, give your students another way to see the world and connect with people outside of schools, there's Skype in the classroom, which is weekly live events, and you don't necessarily have to have your camera on and be participating in that way, but it's a link where your students can watch, almost have a tour guide them through a museum or a zoo or a park, and there's a whole list of them right there. Other ideas is the Smithsonian also has a similar thing, similar to the California Parks and Recreation Department. There's a whole example list here of the different exhibits that you can visit, and the tour guides and museum docents give you some ideas on ways you can connect that to your classroom on those web pages. But other ways you can also travel and make your content come to life is by visiting Google Arts and Culture, which if you've used this resource before, it's constantly evolving. There's lots of virtual field trips and tours on there too. You don't have to make those your own either if you want to use a template. So if you go to Google Arts and Culture, it's a partnership between Google and millions of national heritage sites, UNESCO World Heritage sites, museums, landmarks, memorials, you name it. And there's a partnership between Google and that institution. And there's lots of virtual tours here. So on the Google Arts and Culture homepage, it tells you, it gives you kind of like a curated list here. If you want to go somewhere, it's going to show you resources and links to field trips, museums, artwork, games. The other way to get to virtual field trips here on Tour Creator is if you click Explore, it comes up as one of the options. But here's an example. You can go and take our students to the Taj Mahal. How about that? It's pretty exciting. So the other way to get there is to click Explore, and then there's panoramic videos, but there's also Street View, and that's where the virtual field trips are. And I am going to link additional examples of how you can use these tools on this slide deck. And here is a sample guide to help students kind of process as they go through that virtual field trip, so it's not just passive consumption. They're actively reading and listening and engaging with the content. All right. Other examples here, you can help connect other subject areas to your content as well. Studies have shown that if you make those interdisciplinary connections, students get excited about it, and again, helps recruit more interest and engagement for learning. So within Google Arts and Culture, there's this feature called Art Camera, and it connects artwork to lots of different subject areas. They have exhibits. There's specific ones focused for math teachers and for science, and even sports if you're a health teacher. And Art Camera allows you to zoom in on pieces of artwork too, so you could use that as kind of like a lesson starting point and find artwork depending on your subject area that you teach and even more. So I would just suggest diving in and exploring Google Arts and Culture because chances are you're going to find something that you like and that interests you. All right, so we've talked about getting our students excited about our content by bringing it to life and to taking them to different places. So if you wanted to pause the video and kind of sit and reflect, you could do that now. But the other key thing that we're going to focus on is engaging students with the teacher. So how do you stay connected with your students if you're teaching virtually or if you're in a different learning environment than a traditional brick and mortar school, and maybe we're practicing social distancing, so you're trying to find alternative ways to connect with your students besides sitting very close to them. So there's lots of different ways that you can do this. Some of these we probably mastered and used quite a bit during remote learning. An example of this, synchronous version, so real-time scheduled right then and there interaction is using Google Meet, which is a video conference tool. And I have linked in an example there of how to use Google Meet and a guide to help your students. The other examples here is using its learning messages to connect with your student is a great way to do those check-ins. So ask them how they're doing, if they need help, if they need resources, if they're stuck, just ask them how their day's going and check in on their well-being. Flipgrid is another great tool that you could use for check-ins, whether it's a social emotional check-in, checking on their well-being, or asking them how their progress is coming on an assignment, it is a video response tool. So there's definitely a whole session that could be spent on Flipgrid, but you can set up a grid, which is like your class on Flipgrid, and students post videos and they respond to topics, which are like questions. So on your grid, you can set it up to where it's kind of like a check-in grid, and you're the only one, the teacher is the only one who can see those videos if that's the way you want to have it set up. So using moderate mode is how you could do that. And I've linked Flipgrid here so you can get your free teacher account. Flipgrid's always free forever. It gives students the ability to connect with you there, and you can even have a video response back to them. It's in emojis and smiley faces and all that good stuff. Google Forms can also be used to check in with students. It's like a little survey, just a sample student check-in here. Pulled this from another teacher's class, so their name, asking them what they've been working on outside of school, what advice they have, just some low-stakes questions here to see how they're doing and to get their input and their feedback. And then the last two that are on here are communication tools. Google Voice is a Google feature that you can use to call your students and use your phone, but also maintain your confidentiality and your own private phone number. And there's instructions there on how to set that up and what that is. The other one that's linked is called Talking Points. And this is a tool that you can use to connect with your students and also their families. And it's kind of similar to like what a Remind texting alert tool is. But what's great about Talking Points is that it can be translated into tons and tons of different languages. So if you want to give your students and their parents a communication tool that might be more accessible to them, you can set up a class on Talking Points and send your students and your families messages there. Another key thing for keeping students engaged with learning is giving them feedback and persisting and getting them excited. It kind of falls into that sustaining effort and persistence part of engagement, motivating our students to continue going, and feedback is key for that. So there's actually been a study, and it was conducted during online learning environments in the past, and then the current one that we were just in. And the results that I have linked on here for additional reading if you're into that, the results show that students felt more motivated by video and audio feedback than just written text and comments. They felt like it was more personalized. It was tailored to them, that their teacher was giving a very personal reflection and advice to that students, and they felt connected. They also felt like it was more clear than a written assignment, and they might struggle with some of those words. It's written out, text feedback. So this is an option for your students to not only make it accessible, to make it more exciting as well. So giving your students personalized feedback in audio and video forms is fairly easy to do, and there's lots of options out there for doing that. You can also, a really obvious way of doing this is just have a Google Meet with that student. If you can arrange a time to do that, just talk with them in real time and conference with them. But the other options here that are a little bit more asynchronous in nature, so anytime, anywhere, the students could see your feedback, is voice comments with Read and Write for Google. There is the ability to add a voice comment in a Google Doc. So currently this feature only works in Google Docs, but you can have a feedback doc going for your students and just add voice notes there and they can listen to it. This guide goes through how to do that in depth. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that, but basically you use the Read and Write for Google toolbar, which is across your Google Chrome web browser. And there's a little voice note recording button here when you're on a Google Doc, and it allows you to record a 60-second recording at one point in time. So 60 seconds at once, but you can add lots of those different recordings down the page. So it's a way to tell your students, you did a really great job on this. I just need you to fix a couple of things grammar-wise, or you can give them other forms of feedback. The other great thing for giving students feedback is to actually make a video of yourself. So Screencastify is currently the tool that I'm using to record this session right now. And as you can see, it does have a webcam feature because you can see me. Your students also have Screencastify, so they can give you Screencastify videos, but you can use this to give them feedback. So what's great with Screencastify is it records your browser, so you can record you explaining maybe an area to improve on their document or their slides presentation, and have yourself kind of over here on the side like I am right now. You can do webcam only mode to where it's just your face, or just the screen only and they can hear your voice. But whenever you use Screencastify, all of our staff currently have a paid version of this. We upgraded your account so you have unlimited recording time and unlimited recordings. I probably wouldn't go and make a 60-minute recording giving students feedback. That's a very large chunk of time, but it does mean that you can record as often as you want. And to record on Screencastify, it's a extension, so it'll be across the top of your toolbar, and you'll open that. You'll have to give it permission, set up an account the first time, but once you do, it saves all of your recordings into Google Drive. From there, you can send your students a link to watch your feedback, or if you're in Google Slides like I am right now, you can embed a video, and it can be an embedded video recording of you giving your students feedback, and they can even respond with video if they wanted to. So that's a great way to give students personalized feedback in a really quick, efficient way. And research shows that students feel like that's more motivating to them than just a text comment. Other examples here that are kind of fun is you can use GIFs. So those animated GIFs, kind of like what this little Pine air freshener is right there. They're animated pictures that you can put yourself in them. This is a website here. Actually, that's a video. There's a website that's called andthenIwaslike.co, and I have it linked. But what it does is it allows you to make an animated picture like a GIF. You can insert that into student work so they can see you, they see a personalized feedback from you. And you can also use your own Bitmoji and copy and paste that into documents and student work too for more personalized, fun feedback. So that's ways to connect students and the teacher. The next big thing is making sure our students have the opportunity to collaborate and to stay connected and to have that classroom community no matter what environment we find ourselves in, which initially maybe that seems a little difficult to do. Maybe it's already kind of crazy to get students to collaborate in person. And then when they're all scattered across different places and working at different times, it might seem like an uphill battle, but there's definitely options for doing this, and providing options is key. So you can provide synchronous choices for students to collaborate with each other where it's happening in real time. So maybe you have a Google Meet set up and some of your students are in there. You can put them into groups and they can work together. Or you can do asynchronous, where students collaborate with each other, but it's not all happening right at the same time. So maybe they post a video on Flipgrid, then another student watches it later and they respond. Or they're working on a shared collaborative Google Slides presentation and they're commenting and writing it with each other, but it doesn't have to be all in the moment. They can do that over a span of a week or a span of a few days. So a couple of examples to kind of have students stay connected no matter what learning environment you're in is to have small meetings with Google Meet. So yes, you can definitely have a full class meeting with Google Meet if you give students a couple times a day to do that, but you can also use this as a way to connect with small groups. Because sometimes we know, even when we're in an in-person setting, that some of our quiet students might not like to speak up on a Google Meet call either. Maybe they feel intimidated or just they don't feel comfortable. So putting them in a small group might give them a less intimidating way to show their understanding and to chat with you and to chat with peers. So a way to do that is you can set up a Google Meet, but if you want to block off times for students to pick what's best for them to meet with you and to meet with a small group, you can have them just mark it down on a Google Doc. You can give a couple of options and have them have editing access to that document and fill in their name. The other option is to use the registration tool on It's Learning, which is kind of one of those little hidden gems that isn't used super often because it's not always the most practical tool, but it is for this instant. So you can have your student register for a time, or really a group appointment time, to meet with you or to meet with a small group. So if I go to my It's Learning course and I click Add, it's not one of these super popular tools, so I'll click Show All. And then it's further down in Activities, and it's the registration tool, right? And the point of this tool is to create an event that students can register for. So in this case, that event is a small group Google Meet. Maybe it's a peer review or a reflection. So I'll give it a title. My description there, I have a title, and here are my options. So maybe I want to give them 2 times to pick for the morning meeting. So the first one I can do And maybe I have limited spots. I don't want these to be crazy wild groups. So I can put 10. Maybe in this next one, I only have 8 students in there. I can even do smaller than that. If I want to have more options, I can click add new option. So maybe I'll add, that one can be for 5 students. When I'm setting this up, I have my choices there. I have my number of seats, so that's the number of students that can register for that. And once I hit that number, it's no longer an option if another student's trying to go in and select it. I'll let them select only one. If I want them to pick 2, I could do that. That can get a little confusing, so I'm only going to have them pick 1. I can have them explain their choice. I'm not going to do that for this instance, but maybe you're using this registration tool to have students pick a novel study that they're going to focus on, or they're picking groups and they explain why they're picking that topic, or why they want to work with those students, or why they want to study that particular novel or that theme. You can set that up and they have a text box that pops up and they try to make their choice for registering. But if not, I'm going to turn that off so they can't see each other's choices. You can let them edit after they submit their response. I'm just going to leave that no for now. You can pick a deadline, mandatory, and save. So when students go in to do this, I'm going to toggle into student view, which is beside the add button in my course. And it's in resources. And here it is for the student. What they'll see is a register button. And it pops up and they select which one they want to register for and they confirm it. And then I have my choice here selected, and then the teacher sees that as well. Sees all the different students who've selected that and then the ones who haven't made a selection yet. So that could be helpful for managing some of the group work and managing all of your students and keeping this a little bit more streamlined if you're doing small groups. And there's a video there that walks you through everything that I just did in a few minutes. The other way that you can have students collaborate with each other and as a class in real time is to use Jamboard. Jamboard is an interactive whiteboard tool. So it's kind of like a virtual sticky note and writing tool all on your screen. It works on a lot of different devices, all of them really, work on a phone, computer, Chromebook, tablet, iPad, whatever have you. And it's free for all of our students to use. They just have to have their Google account signed in when they try to use it. And they can all be collaborating on real time because it's kind of like a Google tool and that everyone can have access to it, and they can either have view only access or they can have editing access and be collaborating. So there is a tutorial here that I've linked, but if you just want to go straight into Jamboard, it's also linked with the logo. There's lots of templates out there that can kind of scaffold using this tool. So a great way to use Jamboard in a lesson is maybe if you are having a Google Meet call and you want to have students thinking through something, or you want to demonstrate something for your students, or even just do a check-in, ask them what they think the answer is, the 4 corners example there, A, B, C, or D, or asking them how they're feeling confidence-wise on something, or even games. There's templates here for them to do that, and they can all work on it one by one. So I'm going to dive in and just show you an example of Jamboard. So here is a sample template, and I linked a set of 10 templates on my slide deck for you to use. So when I go to Jamboard, here is my action toolbar here on the left. I have drawing utensils, I can erase, I can select things, add sticky notes if I want, where I can give my students instructions. I can add pictures. So maybe I'm having them annotate on a map or on a math problem and I have it saved as a picture. I can upload that. I also have this laser pointer, which is good for presenting, but it doesn't actually stay on my screen. And the select tool if I want to move things around. So if I'm working on this with my students, what I could have them do is I would share this with them. And like other Google tools, there's a share button here at the top. And that is how my other students can get access. So I can also change the background here if I wanted to, but I'm gonna keep it plain for now. I can add other frames here, which are kind of like slides. So if I had lots of them that I want to go over with students, I can add more, or I can view all of them right there. I only have one in this presentation. And I can also clear off any responses as well. But if I wanted to share this with my students, I would click share. And it's the same as other Google sharing resources. So I can type in each student's individual name. That could take forever. Other option here is I can get a shareable link and make it so that all my students can edit. And that gives them the ability to add their own post-it notes on here. So what I could do is each student could have their own little sticky note with their name. And they can move their sticky note wherever they want on this Jamboard. And if I had planned ahead, maybe I have all of their sticky notes over here on the side or another space on this Jamboard so that they don't have to worry about writing it themselves. Maybe if they're a little bit older, they can do that on their own and they can move it around. And as I'm going through the lesson, maybe I have this as a checkpoint where I say, all right, what do we think here? Do you agree? What statement do you agree with? And I have different statements written up here, or I ask them, what do you think the answer is? And they drag their little sticky note wherever they think it is. So that's an option for using Jamboard in the classroom. There are a series of 10 templates here. You can use them for kind of icebreakers at the beginning of the year. So 2 truths and a fib, your students could turn in different truths and a lie about them, and you can put them up on the screen and they all try and guess who it is. The other example here is a guess who. So students send you facts about themselves, and then you put this Jamboard and give students access to it, and they all start writing and typing and try to guess who they think the student is. Okay, moving onward. So those are ways for students to connect with you synchronously in real time. If you want to do some group work that is asynchronous, so students aren't necessarily all working in a Google Meet with you, but they're still working together, you can do some of those activities virtually as well, thanks to some of those amazing cloud-based tools that Google has, like Slides and Docs, where students can be collaborating on one shared document. So if you're wanting to have a streamlined way of organizing your students into groups, Flippity is a Google Sheets tool that can make groups for you just like this. So you can put this Google Sheet image on your It's Learning course and your students can see who they're working with that day. And the way I did this is I typed up all of the student names in a Google Sheets template that's on Flippity's website, and it automatically made these groups for me. I just had to tell them how many groups I wanted, and it had the names of all my students and put them there. So that's kind of a helpful teacher tip there, is to use a resource like Flippity and have the technology do the hard work for you. All right, so after you have played around with Flippity and maybe put your students in group already, you can start diving into using some of these ideas and strategies and templates for collaborative group work, maybe when you're not all in the same classroom and in the same place. This first example here is really great if you're wanting students to practice giving each other constructive feedback and helping students learn to accept constructive feedback. So the example is a Google Slides template. And what you can do is assign students to work with someone, or if you want to give them the flexibility to pick their partner themselves, they can. You can put them in a group, and then what you'll do is one person in the group can make a copy of this peer feedback slide deck, and then share it with the other group members so they all have editing rights, they're all working on it and accessing it together. If you're the teacher, maybe make sure that they share it with you too, or they at least turn in the final product with you so you can see the edits and the revisions. So what we can see here is there's lots of instructions on this. This is a template that was borrowed from Tawny Castillo, and her original is linked there. But this is helpful instructions for you as the teacher. Maybe on this second slide is where you tell the students where their groups are and who they're working with so they know. If they didn't already, it's probably better to tell them that before you give them this slide deck. But here's the instruction slideshow. This is not where students start typing and doing their work. This is just a placeholder there to remind them. And in this specific peer feedback protocol, what students will do is student A will put their finished assignment here. So it's a link to it. So the idea here is that you're having students turn in a variety of different pieces and getting feedback on it. So it could be a Google Doc, it could be a slideshow presentation they've worked on, maybe a YouTube video, but some type of end product. And then the other students, and they maybe would write out some explanation here about what they did. The students that made the work, that made the product, their name goes here. And then in the speaker notes is where the other students would give feedback. And that's where these arrows are pointing. So student A puts their work here and gives some reflections on it and puts their name. And then if I'm student B, I'm going to write some feedback here. And here are some guiding prompts to help students structure that feedback so it's helpful to student A. So tell them something they did well, ask them a question, give them a suggestion. So maybe my students' sample feedback, maybe this is what I want to give them as my sample work. So I could paste in my sample work there and add a link if I needed to. This is just an example to show you. Put my name here. And then the other students would tell me something I did great, something they have a question about, and then give them a suggestion to move forward. And then the next student, follow on down that line. So this could be a whole class Google Slides presentation or whole class period 1, and you assign students a specific slide number. So student A is on slide 4, student B is on slide 5, and then you tell them who they're going to be matched up with so they know that they have to give feedback on slide 4, even if they had to turn their work in on slide 6. It's a way of structuring this and giving students the chance to collaborate and communicate and work with each other without feeling like you're limited by social distancing or teaching outside of the classroom together. So that's an example there, and you can copy that file, make a copy, and make it your own and use it with your students. Okay, so the next example is kind of a reflection activity. This is a little bit different, and then it combines a couple of tools together. I already mentioned Flipgrid once. You don't have to use Flipgrid in this example. You can use a writing response tool or an audio recording tool. It's up to you. In this particular example, I use Flipgrid just because I think it's a great tool for students to connect with each other. And this example here is a way to have your students kind of have that discussion with each other and be reflecting and listening to each other's points, maybe in an environment that's asynchronous and you can't all be talking and chatting with each other at the same time, but they can still have that dialogue. So what this is, it's called Reflection Roundtable. And what students do in this activity is the teacher gives them an essential question or a topic. The students can use this specific slideshow as a way of structuring their responses to that topic. So what students would do is they would type out the question here that they're answering, and they're assigned to a group, or you can let them pick what they're going to be working on and who they're going to be working with. So if you're a teacher, you would need to make a copy of this slideshow. So you have your own. And in this example, what students do is they answer a question on a Flipgrid. So I said Flipgrid is a video response tool. So if I am a social studies teacher, maybe my question I'm having my students answer is, what was the significance of the Great Wall of China? And then students go on and they make a short little video on Flipgrid that answers that. So then what students would do is I give them this Reflection Roundtable Google slide. They go to the Flipgrid link, they post their video, they come back to this slideshow, and what they're going to do is watch a peer's video and reflect on it. So I'm going to pick any 2 classmates that are also on that Flipgrid video page and watch their video, write some notes about what I learned from them. So I'm practicing summarizing, I'm doing some active listening, and that's my activity. So it's a great way to have students kind of listening to each other's responses. And you can make it a much more in-depth question than what I used as an example. But this is a way of structuring that and kind of having in some templates and scaffolds here to build in that discussion activity, even if you're teaching virtually. We're nearing towards the end of this, but another example here for collaboration and an example of how to do this with Google Slides is to have students do a collaborative vocabulary activity. So you can use this for any topic, really. It doesn't have to be vocab. It can be explaining events in history or explaining important people, scientists, concepts in math or math problems, solving them together as a group. But in this example, students all have a slide deck and they're working in a small group. So the teacher can make that group, or it can be a whole class slide deck. And what students do in this example is they show their understanding of vocab words. So maybe it's vocab words from a video they've watched, or it's a list that the teacher provides to them. On this example, the teacher could type out the unit of study and put the link there for the students. Now, this is a student's individual vocab sheet. They can put their name here. If it's a collaborative one, they can put all of their names on it. And then each student is assigned a vocab word. And what they do on this Frayer model is they write the definition of the word, connecting terms. They add a video, which you can do through the insert button on YouTube and video. Or they can also add a picture of the word, and then the word itself goes here. So they're manipulating their understanding of the word in different ways. And then they can work together on that. It can be together or individual. And the great thing is that if you have them work on it as a group, they kind of divide and conquer on those vocab terms. And then as a reflection activity, you can have them go back and review each other's slides and reflect on that. And the example that I have here is from a math class. This is one that the teacher set up, and then every student in the class got to add their own vocab term to this. So that's why they all look a little bit different, is that all of these different students were contributing to this. So they had their running class glossary of vocab terms in math. And they added pictures, definitions, examples from their math book. They were all working on this at different times during the day, but all working on it together. So we are about to wrap up, but the other key thing to know when you're keeping students engaged in a virtual, blended, or in-person learning environment is making sure that students are engaging themselves in the learning and reflecting on what they've been doing so they can better prepare you to plan ahead, and so they know what's working best for them and maybe where they have some areas of improvement. So Google Forms are a great way to have students reflect, think about what they've been doing, practice some metacognition, identify what strategies and tools and resources they prefer to use to learn, maybe which ones aren't necessarily jiving so well. So the example here, and why I gave a Google Form as an example, is it's very easy for you as the teacher to grab some data from this. Whenever you use a Google Form, it's a survey tool. It puts all of your students' responses in a spreadsheet, so you can visually easily scan through there and see what students said, or you can filter it and kind of manipulate the data. But what's also great about Google Forms is that there's a lot of different question types on here. And I've tried to put some examples on here to show you, but this is an example here where the students are reflecting, and you can copy this if you want it. You could click and add their name. They could do a rating scale of how they felt during the lesson. They could pick a picture here. So I wanted to show you that you can add more than just text on a Google form. You can put pictures, which is great for some of our younger learners who maybe need some more visuals. You can have a short answer response here where students type out an answer, and you can have a multi-answer question. So this is a checklist where they select all the ones that apply. And this is great if you're wanting to get students feedback and have them think about what learning strategies have been working for them and maybe which ones aren't. So you know, do I continue to provide those options in the future, or do I tell my students that maybe we're not going to use that tool anymore? And learning activities there. And again, more options for short answer. And then all of your data, all of your students' data goes into a spreadsheet for you to easily view and manipulate the information. And the other examples here, you could do an old school written paper, students to write and reflect and journal about their experiences and what's been working for them. And then you discuss that with them in small groups over Google Meet or in person. Or they can write that digitally. Google Slides are a very flexible tool and are really helpful for giving students a way to express themselves without really a whole lot of constraints. And here's an example of that. This is a writing journal, but it can just be a reflection journal where students think about what they've been doing in your class and maybe what learning activities they've been doing, and if they're liking the virtual field trips, or if they're liking having choices, what choices have helped them learn. They can type and add pictures. They can even put links to their sample work on here. And they can add different slides to add different content. Lots of different choices here, and you can customize this and make it your own before you share it with students. It's a forced copy. So now we're at the point in the video where you can plan and practice or go on a test drive and test out some of these resources. If you want to pause this, maybe set a timer for 10 minutes or so and explore, feel free to do that. It's also a time where if you have questions about something where you can send me an email and I will get back to you. There are additional resources I've linked there that I kind of pulled some ideas from for this presentation. I also have best practices for virtual teaching or in-person teaching and how to use digital tools in meaningful ways. Lastly, you can do this no matter what learning environment you were teaching in. Go forth and prosper and have fun and slide in and have some success like this girl is on this car.